This is Top Shop Podcast.
Shop Podcast.
Top Shop Podcast.
Podcast for automotive service business owners by Paul Donahue.
Welcome to another Top Shop Podcast. I have a special guest. They're all special, but Tim's extra special. So I like the last several podcasts that we just did. Just met Tim at the AST Auto Service and Tire Association Expo in Durham, North Carolina. Fantastic expo. Whether you are an auto repair shop owner, go to get the training, go to see the vendors and talk with the vendors and see what the latest and greatest is going on. Or if you're a company that serves the automotive aftermarket industry, I highly suggest that you go to, I think it's astaexpo.com or org, and go ahead and take a look at being a vendor at this great show. They are going to go from the Sheraton Hotel, which they actually outgrew from what I understood a couple of years ago, but they are going to be in the Raleigh-Durham Convention Center next year for the very first time. Now, Tim, he's been in the automotive aftermarket industry for a couple days now. As of March, he'll have 50 years in the industry. Tim, speaking of ASTA, he's a past president. So, Tim, why don't you start off by telling us about how you got into the auto repair industry and just give us a little bit of info about yourself. He also is the owner of Wilson's Garage for how many years, Tim?
Managed it from 83 and bought it in 88.
And bought it in 88. So he's owned Wilson's Garage in Paughtown, North Carolina, one of our great true states, North Carolina. So that's for sure.
Beautiful state.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
Yep.
Paul, and thank you for having me. Now, as far as Top Shop, I'm just a little country repair shop, just doing my thing. So
yeah,
we have been very proud to have started in the industry and had some excellent mentors. Becoming involved with the Independent Garage Owners of North Carolina, which became Automotive Service and Tire Alliance, has been the reason for my success. The small groups that we meet with and the training that we get was wonderful. Mr. Wilson of the Wilson's Garage namesake was back from World War II as a motor pool sergeant, started Wilson's Garage in 1950.
He was a motor pool sergeant in the service of our country.
Yep.
Came home and then opened his own garage.
Yep. Awesome. He briefly worked for Dodge, putting heaters and air conditioners in cars because they didn't have them when they came from the factory, and decided he could do this at home. So he opened up a shop in 1950, and through some really good parts associations with AC Delco and Napa and Motorcraft, he found that the best parts and good installation is what keeps people coming back. Service to the automobile industry and the local community. In 1954, they decided they needed a fire department. And with his military training and the training that about 12 of the individuals got, they started the Vienna Volunteer Fire Department in 1954. He actually housed the first truck and put the siren up on his building for the first 6 months that they had the fire department. In 1974, they decided they was getting old, so they went to the community churches, the Boy Scout Basketball Association, and they recruited 12 youth, and I was one of those 12 to start with the fire department in 1975. And he said, "What are you doing in the afternoon?" And I said, "I'm come home from school." And he said, "Well, come work for me." So I started working for him around the shop from 2 to 6 in the evening, and then on Saturday till noon.
Wow.
Went through high school and wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with college. Both mom and dad were first generation college graduates. Mama, she did not want me not to go to college. Daddy died when I was 11, and I had a bunch of community members trying to help me out. men in the community, church, fire department, Boy Scouts. Of course, Mr. Wilson was one of those. And I decided to do technical school and auto repair, auto mechanics. So in 1978, I got a vocation, and that education actually awakened a spark, and I wanted more education. So Mr. Wilson was just about ready to retire and wanted someone to take over his business. They said, if you go to school and when you graduate, come on back, and I want to turn this business over to you. So I got a degree in biological and agricultural engineering from NC State University, and there were a recession at the time, no jobs in my industry, in my field. So I came back home really to what I really loved: auto repair, hands-on work, and then I work in the community with the fire department.
Awesome.
So I also had met a young lady from New Mexico, Roberta, while I was at NC State. She had transferred over, and we met and didn't think that we were ever going to get together. But she had more will and determination than I did. She came back to North Carolina for a visit, and we fell in love, and it was a whirlwind romance. And the next Christmas, I asked her to marry me. And so when I graduated, she came out. Then she went back to New Mexico, graduated, and I moved her to North Carolina in September of 1983. We got married. I had taken over the shop for Mr. Wilson when I graduated college. We incorporated the business and set it up so that I could learn and do all the business practices, and then plan for some point. We did that transfer in 1988.
Okay.
Bought the business, and he said, we had, there's ups and downs when you're working for somebody, and I needed to leverage a little more financial stuff.
Right.
I needed loans. I needed to buy new equipment, and as a manager, it was difficult, and it was difficult for the owner to do that.
Right. So when you took over the shop, you reinvested in newer equipment, got it, more up and running. So you had mentioned mentorship. So I noticed that a lot of the top shops, the ones that are really doing well, they've got strong revenues, they've got really good shop culture. I mean, things are going right for them, usually for a reason. I've noticed three things. One, they have a coach. Two, they have a digital marketing agency that's getting them the kind of results that they need. And three, they get constant training, because this industry is changing like this with especially with computerization and stuff like that. So what role did mentorship play in your career? And would you say that your most influential mentor was Mr. Wilson?
He was not a joiner, so he didn't join any of the trade associations.
Okay.
But he encouraged me to.
Okay.
Through that association, I found Bob May's Auto Service, and Bob May himself he was probably halfway through his career, and he had started basically like me at a service station. I had gas pumps and did mostly vehicle service, and we transitioned from there after. I joined Independent Garage Owners, and Bob May helped me. We got a lift for every bay. We added an outside lift, and we transitioned away from gasoline sales.
Oh, okay. Because he was a service station. That's how the industry started, right?
That's right.
Yeah, because I'm thinking back. I'm thinking back to maybe RFD and stuff. There were no service stations. It was a gas station that they serviced cars. That's how the whole industry started, right?
That's exactly right.
Never really thought about that.
Then Bob May, he had started out in a Gulf station with 2 bays. Well, he had transitioned to a Quonset hut looking building that had 5,000 square feet, and he had the power of marketing that he would market to the 2 hospitals that were close by. and he did pickup and delivery of those automobiles for nurses and doctors.
Okay.
So he had a cap, and we both really we had a really strong training group with the Garage Owners Association. I was also a member with Automotive Service Association, and then several of the trade associations that started, like AC Delco, NAPA, and really got a lot of good technical training from AC Delco. My management training came from what's now Automotive Service and Tire Alliance and IGO, and my other training, people training, was from the small groups and the mentorship with Independent Garage Owner Forsyth unit. We're in Forsyth County of North Carolina, and we still have units across the state with the ASTA.
Okay. I want to ask you a question that I need to ask every really experienced auto repair shop owner. Can you describe a major setback or failure you encountered along the way and how you overcame it? Now, I said a major setback. So usually in someone with a 50-year career, they usually have more than one. But if you can just think of one, that would be a good one. That the younger auto repair shop owner that's just getting started would just love to hear. Would love to hear.
So I've actually owned the business through 3 recessions. Started out in one, and I had really good leadership. I had financial. I guess it's a look forward. I knew what my bills were, and I knew what we could generate dollar-wise.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't get caught up in overextended loans or credit cards. Now, I was really close in the 06-07 recession where all the building industry went bad, and I found out how many contractors that I had that I serviced their vehicles. But my mainstay was school teachers. I have 3 schools that are close by. I have people that had to use their vehicles. So we really did a lot of target marketing to those types of individuals, and kept the bays. They weren't full, but they were busy enough that we didn't reduce any employees at all through any of those recessions. After 9/11 and 06-08, and then during COVID.
Yeah, well, I'll give you a piece of information here. I own Advanced Digital Media Services, so I have hundreds of customers in every type of industry imaginable, but I wanted to go and focus on one niche, and I chose auto repair. And one of the reasons why is right about the time I was making this decision, we already had several auto repair shops. They were at the very top of Google for their keywords in their markets. And I started doing some research on recession-resistant businesses. Now, guess what the number one recession-resistant business is?
I can never guess.
Liquor stores. Number 2, barbers.
Oh, really?
3, auto repair shops. 4, doctors. So
I need to add a liquor store
to Wilson's Garage and Liquor. Wilson's Garage.
It might not go over well with 10 friends.
Right.
And again, I can leave the back door open for them.
There you go. Yeah. So anyway, just the other auto repair shop owners, if you're in this industry and you didn't know that you are in a historically proven recession-resistant business, you are. Now, recessions always do one thing. They thin out the crowd quick. So the ones that aren't at the top of Google, they're not going to get the business. Those tend to go. In the last big recession that we had, they proved that the companies in all industries that ranked at the top of Google or in the top of Google for their targeted keywords are the ones that tended to make it through because they were getting all that new business from the people doing those searches. So that's why it's really important to have a good digital marketing agency that keeps you at the top of Google. But you are, if you did not know it and you're listening and you're an auto repair shop owner, you are in one of the best recession resistant industries in the United States of America. So tell me about how you gravitated to being the president of the ASTA. Now, this was my first. I want to stop right here and give a plug for this incredible organization. So this is the first time that I went to the ASTA. I went to Vision, and I think that's an incredible organization and trade show put on. It's really good. When I went to ASTA, my wife automatically noticed the difference between the Vision, which we love and we're going back to again, and ASTA. And I said, "What do you think the big difference is?" She goes, "It's more homey here. It's more like Friends type thing." So we detected a culture immediately that it was different. And let me prove it to everybody. If you're not a member of the ASTA, I highly suggest you join. And here's why. Just one reason. One of the members of the ASTA came down, North Carolina resident and auto shop owner, came down to the expo, and the hurricane hit. And this person was notified that his house and his business were gone. They weren't there. So what did the ASTA do? They started a GoFundMe, and then the last day after the trade show, they have a big dinner. Those vendors, including me, donated tens of thousands of dollars of services, equipment, and it was all auctioned off, and every penny was going to help this particular family out. Now, that is the type of organization that I want to belong to. So if you're not a member of the ASTA, join. And then you know what? You take that badge and you put that on your website, and that's a trust signal. I'm not going to go down that road. There are psychological ways to immediately build trust the second your webpage loads. If you want to know, call me. I'll show you. One of them is getting those trust badges on the homepage of your website. So the consumer doesn't know what the heck the ASTA is. They just say, "Oh, look at this shop that's got all these badges. I think I'll trust them more than the other one." It's all subconscious, but it works. So tell us about ASTA. You were a member. You were at the very beginning. It was even called a different organization, and they were like, "Hey, let this guy run it." So tell me about it, Tim.
So we basically started out as a trade association so that we could get insurance. So we ended up as a trade association that had our own insurance agency, and we still are partnered with an insurance agency. So through the 50s and 60s, it was very difficult to get garage keepers liability insurance and fire insurance, and that industry grew, and we were able to have insurance for all of our members. You had to pay to be a member. And then as the 80s and 90s came along, they did away with a whole lot of having to be a member to get the insurance. But we have a real good, strong book of insurance. In fact, when we had a couple of strong hurricanes down east, we had insurance companies go out of business. And then they said, "We're not writing any insurance east of 95, which is a big highway that cuts our state in about 2/3. And we had members down there. So as an industry and with our legislators, we were able to get together with that group and have garage keeper liability insurance even in the east of 95 area. So we had some lobbying ability. We had some ability to provide insurance services to small shop owners. And then we also had the mentor program that is going on all the time. Bob May got me started on the board of directors for the Garage Association and basically replaced himself. He had started out as a junior director and a senior director, and brought me on board as he moved up in the chain and became president. It was 13 years of being on the board before I became president in 2001. We had some good times. We had some bad times during that time. we were able to grow the organization, and in the past few years, our merger with North Carolina Tire Dealers Association been a tremendous thing. We had an executive director that wanted to include the technicians, not just garage owners, hence the name change. Technicians are really what builds this industry because they learn and do their thing, and then they become shop owners. And we wanted to make that culture part of our culture too. Not only do we recommend that you mentor another shop technician, whether it's in your state or outside your state. We wanted to bring world-class training to North Carolina, so we started out bringing world-class training.
Yep, you guys did.
Now I know we're international, but now because we had some Canadian folks down with us, and we're glad to attract Advanced Digital Automotive Group. It was great to see there. I sat through your class, and every point you made about SEO, I had been touched on, but not to the depth that you were able to do it. So I look forward to some more of that, and that is what really grew our service and automotive service and tire lots.
Mm-hmm.
Is the dedication by key individuals in the industry, in the training side, in the marketing side, and then in the auto repair side.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
And we don't want to leave out body shop folks.
Nope. Right.
We have a lot of collision shops that are members, and we really want to make sure that we do everything for everybody. But sometimes you have to do some target work. Technicians really need training no matter where they are. Shop owners too.
Yeah, you reminded me to we're changing our website, and we're going to have a specific area focused on body repair. So I've got a shop down in St. Petersburg. He was doing 350,000 gross. He's doing over 600 now since he hired us 3 years ago. So
that's great.
He went from 17,000 to 39,000. So the auto dealer across the street moved. He bought it.
There you go.
And he's just getting in. So he's really doing a phenomenal business. He's a very good business person, very sharp on his marketing, very tough on me on my numbers, but we produce them. He's a good customer. Well, that's what you're supposed to be, you know.
Hopefully they train us to the point we don't need you.
Yeah. I don't think that'll ever happen. So it takes 4 different teams just to create a website. People don't know this. You know, when I talk, like, what? Yeah. 4 separate teams. None of them know how to do each other's job. You got to have an SEO team that knows how to do all the keyword research and research all the competition and look at all the keywords that are being used on those pages that are already ranking at the top of Google and analyze them pages, and then write a recipe, so to speak, to hand over to the writing team that knows how to do the writing specifically for auto repair, while the front-end developers who don't know anything about SEO and anything about content writing are putting the look and feel together of the website and the UI and the UX. And then when the website's done, you have to have a back-end developer put all those plugins in that all serve a certain function on the website, and there are certain settings on all those plugins, and they all don't know each other's job. So that's really goes into a website today that's going to provide a return on investment. You know, you can get someone with a website for dummies book on a computer that knows the web to produce a brochure, you know, but not one that's going to produce revenues for the owner. What are the core values or guiding principles, Tim, that you feel that has contributed to your success?
Honesty above all.
Okay, number 1, integrity. There you go.
Honesty and integrity.
And I keep hearing that one over and over.
And that goes. I may not wear this uniform, but 8 hours a day, but 24 hours a day, I'm still Tim.
Right.
And in my personal life and in my public life, I still carry those core values that the Boy Scouts taught me: trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. And you can't go past the trustworthy. That first one is trustworthy. and if without trustworthy, the rest are nothing. So I was taught by many men, my Kay, my ladies that influenced my life, especially that. And then over the years, the communication between the consumer and the shop has got to be clear. There are perceptions on both sides of the counter, and you've got to make sure that when you say, I want this, and I hear you say that I'm not thinking something else. So you have to know what that is. You have to say, I'm hearing you say this, and this is what I hear. And so that communication, it has to be there.
Yep.
Really and truly, I have very, very few. I don't even have people get mad anymore. I used to periodically.
Right.
Clear about the repair, or I wasn't clear about the price, or I wasn't clear about the timing.
Right.
And it really, usually it was all on me. But I had that expectation service, and they got what they got.
Right.
Well, today, repair the car is that's a given. You're going to repair the car. You're going to repair the car in a time frame that you say, and you're going to repair the car with the highest quality parts. So those things, you've got to do those today. Every bit of it. And then the experience for the customer, the way you handle your business, the communication, the ease of this, you make it a whole lot less trouble than a dentist pulling a tooth. You've got to get up there. I think we're ranked pretty low in people wanting to come to the repair shop.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're like 11th, 7th to 11th or something in different reasons. But if you can make that a pleasant experience, at least not disagreeable, then you can do that. So integrity, communication, and ease of service.
Okay.
Those are three things that I've found.
Okay. I've never spoken with or met a successful shop owner that did not have a good, strong shop culture. How do you build and maintain a strong shop culture in your shop, Tim? Well, I think you just gave the number one
Part
answer
of
to that.
I'll give you part.
Integrity. Yeah, you already gave me a part of it because your staff sees the integrity that you have. They see you trying to gouge a customer for price or this or that.
That's right.
It. Integrity out the door. Subconsciously, your staff knows that you're not a person of integrity. So yeah, all of that affects shop culture. So I would guess, a shop owner that has a lot of integrity, there's the base of your shop culture, right?
Sure. And then how do you keep it from flying off the handle? Okay.
Right.
So you do that with standard. I'm a fire service guy. Got a lot of training and management in the fire service. So we have standard operating guidelines. We have them for the fire service. We've got them for the shop. This is the way you do this repair. This is the way you greet the customer. This is the way you answer the phone. You do everything the same way, and you do proven methods using trainers from all over the industry through the years. I bet you could have found any one of those trainings at ASTA.
Mm-hmm.
How to answer the phone, how to run that front counter, how to do this, how to greet a customer. I had a retired fire chief that came in, and he called it sharks in the water. Sometimes there's sharks in the water. You don't want to let a customer in that water. You want to get them out, rescue them from that area, because there's liable to be something. If they start bleeding, then it's really bad. You've seen the shark frenzy thing. His analogy was a pool with there's a few sharks in it, but then there's all these fish that you love, and you don't want one shark. So that also means don't create any of them.
Right.
Sharks in that water, and if they're in there, get them out of there. So it's an excellent analogy, And I've always thought, we have a 8 o'clock jam of customers to bring and drop off things, and you got a 5 o'clock jam of customers that are picking up. Well, if you can make that a lot easier, if you schedule those customers so they're never really together, and then you have a little better shop culture too. You make it easier for those customers; they don't have to wait in line. You do pickup and delivery. You do drop-off services. Do all kind of things that ease that 5 o'clock shock and the 8 o'clock drop-off. So we're a small shop,
Right.
probably 5 or 6 cars a day, really.
Okay. You're 2 bays, right?
Two inside and then 2 outside.
And 2 outside. Okay.
Yeah,
So-
and then a third oil change rack. It is an old pit where we go down under and
for oil changes and stuff.
oil changes and alignment.
On alignment. Yeah. Okay.
So we're a fairly high tech shop too.
Okay.
We
Yeah.
get a lot of things from other shops that can't be fixed.
Yeah, let me go. That'll lead me right into my next question, Tim. How do you stay innovative and adapt to the changes in this industry?
So through all the training that's available,
Right.
I recommend every one of my technicians, and now tell you about them. I've got Jim and Paul were my sons, so they have joined me in the business from the time they were in diapers.
Oh,
And
okay.
then my wife Roberta, and really I credit the success of Wilson Garage is when Roberta started coming to help me in the business when school. So by the time Jim was 6, 7, and Paul was 3 or 4, we had them in some sort of school. She was, and that's the simple. And we're talking about the middle '90s, early 2000s. When she came in, you could see the relief in my female customers' eyes when they got to see a lady on the front counter.
No kidding.
And many times we found out that their repair decisions are 70% driven by the female side of the industry.
Yeah.
And so Roberta helped with softening my approach. She gave a beautiful light to the front counter, and she would stay and help me back in the evening to greet the customers. And Roberta is really, I find that she's what made Wilson's Garage such a success, is to have that partnership with her and us be able to work together 8 to 10 hours a day, not have issues at home, and we can communicate well. She's learned how to communicate with those customers through classes, and AC Delco had empowering women classes, and we had women shop classes for our ASTA, and so I really, and then I grew my own technicians, both of them. Paul and Jim are excellent. They listen to customers. They interface with the electronics really easy.
Mm-hmm.
Then I have a Volvo, world-class Volvo technician, Brian, that came to work for me last year. And I have a retired Forsyth County fireman that needed extra work. He was helping me around the shop. Now he's 40 hours. And Brian is excellent. Richard is excellent. Everyone in our shop volunteers in the community probably as many hours as they work at the shop.
Wow. So there's another to my shop culture question. So you don't do it for business; you just do it as a part of the community. It's the law of returns, So you do good comes back to you. So yeah, that's one of the when I ask about shop culture, that's one of the top things that they say is integrity, and we do a lot of community involvement. We're involved with the high school, with this, that, and so the community sees this brand, they see this logo, they see this. You don't do it for the business, you do it for the community, but the community sees that you're doing it for the community and you get the business.
And there's nothing wrong with it benefiting the business.
Nope, not at all. Now, next question. There's not a shop that's going to make it if they don't handle their finances correctly.
That's correct.
Oh, what are some of the important lessons that you've learned about managing finances and making wise investments in your shop?
So, Mr. Wilson, we still do a cash register program.
Right.
So everything that we ring up, we pay our taxes on. So the shop management software is wonderful, but I still run everything through a cash register. It's my final thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we match that against our income and against our expenses, and we know for exactly what we owe tax wise and what we owe for our bottom line stuff.
Right.
So
okay.
we're still doing a cash register, and then my inventory system is still extremely simple. I was very lucky to come into the computer world while I was in college.
Mm-hmm.
I did some programming through my ag engineering background. I did some programming with BASIC, and then Fortran and COBOL programming, and then some things that DOS that later became Windows.
Right.
My first auto repair shop controller program was a DOS program, and I can see the platforms that were built from those programs to the Windows programs we have today. Shop management. Bob May got me involved with a group out of Texas that did training, and they did shop management, and we worked through some of that. Now I don't know if you know the history of those, out of Canada and then out of Texas. They ended up it's a little town outside Dallas Fort Worth, Plano, I believe is the name of it.
Yeah.
Is where a whole lot of the shop management stuff came from. We got some out of Canada, some out of here. And about that same time, a trainer out of Canada named Kelly Bennett came into, and he fell in love, came to our convention and fell in love with us. And we trained probably 1,000 shop owners using Kelly Bennett's proven skills. And I'm extremely proud of that. So simplicity for me. Don't get too many monthly costs. Don't have something that's coming out monthly all the time that you can't manage if business goes down. That's
Right.
my recession proof thing. Use as much cash that you generate with your profits to buy the things you need. Don't borrow if you can help.
Right.
You will have to leverage your cash. You'll have to leverage your income because there's expenses in staying ahead. And stay up with technology. You've got to stay on the forefront of it. And I like to use the wave. If you're a surfer, you've got to ride that wave. If you get under it, you're going to get buried.
Mm-hmm.
You got to ride that wave. You don't have to always be on the top of the wave. You can be in the curl, but you got to be on your toes.
Yep. Well, that leads right into my very next question. What trends and developments do you see shaping the industry, and how are you guys preparing for them and meeting them? So we got ADAS. We got in 10 more years we might have flying cars because they've already taken my drone I got in my garage. They just blew it up.
Yeah. I'm really mad. I don't have my flying car already. I was promised my flying car in the 70s. So. But
We've got them now.
What I see in the industry is there's electronic everything.
Yes.
And every new system has there's a steep incline, a learning curve, and diagnostic, and then it seems to become self-diagnosing, and you get some moderation in it. And I'll just say tire sensors is an example. And for me, it was OBD2, the onboard diagnostics 2 that started in 1996. Oh, there was thousands of codes, and there's all these things to sort through. But finally, the car, if you use the power of the automobile and the power of your scanner, you could harness that, and it helped you with the diagnosis. It also, and that's increased. We know now that one code can have 4 different meanings, and it could be shorted, it could be open, it could be not communicating. There's all those things, and now the car will tell you if you know what to do. And then you can bypass the system. As long as you've learned that system, you can use digital oscilloscopes to tell what are the electronics doing. So where did I learn this? I went to college. I attend every single trade association training, and every time I go to ASTA, I take half management and half technician.
Okay, that's wise. Yeah.
That helps me. And
Yeah.
I do the same thing with my both sons, make sure they do it. And we belong to 3 different park groups that offer training. We do that. We have just switched to a camera alignment system, and made our job, like, the setup is so much less, and we know we have accurate measurements. It makes the alignment job so much easier. I looked at ADOS,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought about opening a second shop just to do calibrations. If I was a little tighter with the body industry, I might have done that. I made a conscious decision, Paul, in 1991 that I wanted to stay the size shop I am. I'm a little limited with zoning issues,
Okay.
and I wanted to have time with my family. So we quit working on Saturday in early 90s. We made our living 9 to 5 instead of 8 to 6. We went to ASTA last year and talked to a wonderful lady that only works 3 days a week. And I came back and said to the shop owner, to the shop, here's 3 things that I learned. We're going to implement 2 of them today. And they all closed the shop on Friday afternoon. And my gross profit increased by 20% for the rest of this year.
Wow. By closing early.
Yeah, they work harder. They love that extra time off, and the community has responded, supported us in being there 4.5 days.
See, all the shop owners' goals are different. That's why our company, we do a discovery call with everybody. We just get them on the phone and ask them a bunch of questions to see if we might be a good fit for their shop, because we're not for a lot of shops. So we don't go into all what we can do for you and blah, blah, blah. I found that it's just best just to chat with people, because some people don't want to grow. They don't want, I'm fine where I'm at, or some people want, hey, I'm getting older. I'd like to get a second shop, and then turn both of them over to my son, whatever their goals are, whether they're individual goals are. So, and then you mentioned standard operating procedures earlier in the call, and I forgot to mention this. Tom Ham at the Automotive Management Network, for $199 a year. There's another badge that you can put on your website, and he's got all of the.
You froze up just a minute.
Yeah, he's got all the shop rates on his website across the whole country, and then he's got hundreds of standard operating procedures you can just download and just make them fit for your shop. So if you're a newer shop owner and you haven't heard of Automotive
Yeah.
Management Network, Tom Ham's got a massive library that will make your life so much easier. So it's Automotive Management Network. So go there. And then you mentioned your wife, and my wife belongs to, and I did a podcast with Tiffany, the president, Amazing Women in Automotive. So if there's any ladies listening and you haven't heard of Amazing Women in Automotive, they had a special dinner just for the ladies at the ASTA Expo. So my wife loved it. It was a great dinner. So any of you ladies listening, there's a group and an organization just for you, because more and more women are getting into the industry, and more shop owners are finding that instead of the big burly guy with the beard at the counter, if you have a woman there, it's a big difference in how a lot of customers will interact with that person. And we're finding more and more shop owners saying, oh yeah, I found my service person she was a waitress. She was just phenomenal. And we asked her if she wanted to do something different, and we trained her on our industry. And now she's our top service person, takes all the calls, books all the appointments, calls and texts the customer, let them know the car's ready for pickup, handles all that stuff, So, and you mentioned something earlier, and it's one of my last questions I want to ask you. What are your thoughts on work-life integration? Because you said, hey, we're going to no more Saturdays, which I'm doing right now, instead of going mountain biking in those mountains right there, sitting here in the desk for 6-8 hours a day on Saturday, getting caught up on the stuff I couldn't get done during the week. That's usually what it takes to really grow a company. What is your
we did it basically, Roberta and I did it to raise our children.
Okay.
We also made the conscious decision for her to not work outside the home for the first 6 years.
Okay.
It was extremely difficult as a shop owner because, most of the small business shop owners in the United States, having a working wife will save your bacon.
Yeah.
You have that extra income.
Right.
But we chose not to do that. But then I pulled her into the business. That meant we had to work a little harder. My brother and his wife had children about the same time, and my sister and her husband had children about the same time. And we made a conscious decision for all three families to be together specific periods of time. We go camp through the Boy Scouts. We camp, and then through family camping, we camp at least once a month with the family. We made that decision. Now that makes it a little harder on my community stuff, my church and my fire department, but everybody understood there. And we're not going to be rich, right? We're not going to make a whole boatload of money, but I bet I'm the richest man in Potsdam.
Awesome. Great answer. So what you were just telling me was balance. So you had other things, but you knew the importance of, hey, one weekend a month I'm spending with the family camping. Because when I went camping when I was a kid, those are some of my most cherished memories. Yeah. There's some of
my brother and I probably do more of that because his wife, she is very insistent. Get calendars out. We're gonna mark all the calendars when we're going where. And we do. We set them up, then we call and make reservations. Now both sons have campers. Her oldest son is going camping with us, and so at the beach now we're going to be about 6 campers when we go down 4th of July week.
Okay, and where are you going?
So we have been traditionally going to Powerland Campground in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It's actually Surfside.
All right.
And I had a cousin Mike and the two moms, the grandmoms, and now the great grandmoms would get the little camping cabins that they have available. We'd be sometimes 30 of us at the
wow. That's a big get together. You ever go to Hilton Head?
I think we've made reservations for the July 4th coming up. So
for Hilton Head, yeah. I've got a client there. He's my longest client. He's been with me over 20 years. So,
yeah.
So, okay. Last and final question. What advice would you give to the aspiring entrepreneur who's just getting his shop started?
So a whole lot of them were technicians that either left a dealership or left another shop and went out on their own.
Right.
Number one, join your trade associations. Number two, find a mentor. Whether you pay them or you just make friends with them, find a mentor, someone to hold you accountable, that they can give you the advice, and then make sure that you're doing the things. And for $199 a year, order up some standard operating guidelines. That is a savior. Especially if you're struggling to make these jobs work, maybe you're taking in jobs that you can't fulfill the needs of that customer, and you have to hire somebody, and then you feel like you got to work all these hours. You might. You're going to have a heavy financial investment at the beginning. You're going to have to buy a bunch of stuff. You're going to have to rent a place. You're going to have a bunch of money, but work your way in there. That mentor will help you. That standard guidelines will help you. That trade association will help you. And then go volunteer something. Go do something. You volunteer your time, and you can do something for people that they can't pay you for. And you will soar in this industry.
You gave the answer, one of the top answers. Almost every person that's successful in this industry has been around. Anybody who's been over 10 years, only 4% of shops make it past that 10-year mark. Say the same thing. Get a coach. Get a mentor. Get somebody who's already been down this road and can help you with your, get your digital marketing, get your culture started, get, everything, all the hundreds of little gears and wheels you need to have working smoothly to make a shop run. So
and then don't forget, fix those cars.
Fix those cars, right?
Fix those cars.
Tim, can't thank you enough for your time. It was a real pleasure meeting you at the trade show, and we got the video of you with our mascot Sky. So
there you go.
That was a great video. So anyway, we appreciate your time very much today, and
thanks, Paul.
Look forward to seeing you next year. All right.
For additional automotive resources and exclusive content, follow us on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel to catch all our episodes. Thanks again for joining us in the driver's seat, and we'll see you next time for another thrilling episode of Top Shop.